Amazing stuff. Hardware specifications aren't really all that interesting now. The point being here is that one of the main design criteria was to use very little power, which of course led to the hand crank design that you saw in the earlier pictures. And I literally wish that I had €1 for every time I heard this question. Where is the crank? Hundreds of times. Every time I'm around, just sitting on a train or giving a presentation or whatever, people think about the crank. And the reason why they think about the crank is not just because it's nice and to remember the picture, but the symbolism behind it. You can be independent. You don't need a power network. You don't need an AC plug or anything to be able to use a computer. You're independent, and with your own strength, physical strength, you can actually create the electricity that runs the computer. I mean, very nice symbolism there. The thing is, it never turned out to be that way. As you can see, there's no cranks here. A couple of reasons for that. The most important being that for children, it's simply not feasible to have them like cranking 24/7 or even a couple of hours a day to produce the electricity. But what's important to realize that the laptop here still uses very little power compared to a lot of other machines, and that opens possibilities for alternative charging solutions. Solar panels being a popular one, or one that I find particularly cute is this one which was recently done in Afghanistan. I think, if I had such a device or other computer geeks had such a device, that probably wouldn't be detrimental to our health either. So just a very nice way of again, generating power. Other people in India have done things where they've basically gotten a couple of cows together and they put them in some kind of wood construction, and the cows walk in a circle all the time, and in the middle you get a generator and that produces electricity for a classroom. So really thinking outside the box and completely new capabilities that are only possible due to the low power consumption of those devices. What's also important when you talk about designing something for children, especially for young children, is it's got to be very robust. People will drop it at one point or another, and if you're out in the middle of Rwanda, in the mountains of Nepal, or somewhere in the jungle in South America, there's no 0800 number that you can call and say, guys, can you fix my machine? It just broke. I mean, that won't happen. So it's been designed to be very robust in mainly 3 dimensions. The first one being humidity and water. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily shower with the thing, but there are videos of people using the laptop in pouring rain for 2 hours and the whole thing's still working. Next one is dust, because in a lot of places, especially in Africa and South America, dust is actually one of the biggest enemies of computers, because you've got fans that are spinning and you get dust sucked into the machines, you've got dust buildup, fans failing, temperatures rising, electrical shorting, and so on and so forth. So the idea here was to use a almost sealed enclosure that doesn't have a fan, so you hardly get any dust inside. So those machines are just much more robust when you're lying on the beach or whatever. And the third thing is that you can quite easily drop it, and things generally don't happen and break. I'm not going to explain how this happened, but sometimes things do go wrong. The nice thing about the whole device is that the way it's built up is it took me about 10 minutes to replace the screen with an additional screen, that I just had lying around. Because if I were to break the display on my laptop here, I would basically have to void warranties and have to rip things apart to get the display, and I might get the whole thing apart, but I would never have a chance to making the whole puzzle fit into one machine again. So the internal structure of the device is also meant to be easily repairable, and in fact I've actually seen 8-year-olds replacing keyboards, displays, whatever. The nice thing is that if you've got 2 broken computers, with one of them having a failing screen and one of them having a failing keyboard, you can actually put them together and have at least one working machine again. So that's quite important. Now, when we come to the whole hype cycle, one of the things why people actually started listening to Nicolas Negroponte when he started talking about the project, and especially why the IT industry was kind of nervous, let's put it that way, when Nicolas Negroponte announced the project, is that he was talking about an initial start of the project of about 10 million units. And 10 million units in the notebook sector in 2005, that was quite a significant chunk of the global market. Especially if you're reaching a market of very young people that would have no chance of getting a regular laptop. Because back in 2005, a laptop actually cost the whole amount of money. thousands of dollars in some places. So what Nicholas Negroponte said initially is that he's not going to start the production of the machine unless 10 million units have been ordered. Well, that turned out to be, well, kind of a mistake, and he realized that step by step he'd have to get down that number because nobody in their righteous mind was willing to spend, I don't know, a couple of €100 million and dollars on an unproven project, especially when you're sitting in a poor country. So I'll talk about some of the numbers later on, but just to give you a dimension, after 2 years of this device basically being available to countries, about 1 million units of them have been sold and are actually being used by children right now. What's also important is that the project is still primarily known as the $100 laptop, and it receives a lot of critique and bashing, both in blogs, the regular media, online media, for not having met the target. In fact, the current price is about $188. But again, considering that in 2005 we didn't have netbooks, we didn't have devices available for $300, $350, $400, you can really credit OLPC for having invented a whole new category of inexpensive computers and devices. And I don't think I'm going out on a limb when I say that we simply wouldn't have the netbooks that many of you are using today if it went for OLPC and this crazy idea of doing a $100 laptop.
You think it's announced as $75 thing now?
I'll get to that in a bit. Now, what's important is I also talked about the hype and misunderstandings in media, and, well, not only misunderstandings, but sometimes also misrepresentation. One of the things, actually, one of the most important stories of 2008 was the so-called Microsoft deal, where it was announced that this machine, the XO1, which up to that point was only able to run a customized Linux operating system, would also be available with a Windows XP operating system. And people went nuts. Two of the main people which have been quoted in all those stories, in hundreds of stories actually, are Walter Bender, who used to be the lead in terms of software architecture at OLPC, and Ivan Kristich, who I'm not sure whether he's in the room, but at least he's at the event here, who used to do the security stuff. And the thing is that both of those individuals and a lot of other people got very, very frustrated by this perceived move away from one of the 5 core principles of OLPC, which is free and open source software. So, not surprisingly, there was an immense loss of goodwill from various FLOSS communities. In Austria, we also had people who dedicated, a year of their spare time working on projects and efforts related to OLPC, suddenly questioning whether they'd been deceived or whether it was all still worth it. And a lot of people actually turned their backs on the project at the time. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, that according to everything we know today, out of the about 1 million units or laptops that are out there in the hands of children, only several hundred, at the maximum worst case, a couple of thousand of them actually use Windows XP. So that's neglectable. But then again, it also shows how a marketing stunt by a company like Microsoft can actually really derail FLOSS projects, and that's definitely something to keep in mind. What is interesting, however, because all bad things also got the good sides to it, is that as a result, an organization called Sugar Labs was created. Sugar generally is the software running on those machines, and while a lot of people just perceive it as a very different user interface for people, it's actually much more than a user interface. So it wants to be much more than a user interface. It wants to be a learning platform targeted at very young children, and again, very young children that might live, or actually most of them do live, in a very different social and cultural context than all of we do. So what's also important about Sugar Labs and the Sugar software is that, again, they're very much focused on free and open source software. And quite a few of you have seen the so-called Windows 7 Sins campaign, which the FSF started in summer of this year. And under education, they actually listed OLPC as, well, probably a despisable project. And I'm quoting the original FSF text here. Negroponte, desiring the financial support of Bill Gates and Microsoft, ignored them being people like Walter Bender and Ivan Kristich,